Hello everyone, welcome to Nostalgia Check, the show where we see if your favorite childhood pastimes stand up to the test of time. Since it's the first episode of this series, let me go ahead and give you a quick rundown on how this all works. First, I'm going to introduce you to whatever we're talking about, and then I'll give you a bit of backstory on why that thing is nostalgic to me. I'll then talk about whatever we are reviewing, when it came out, and what that time period was like. And then we'll go ahead and jump into the story, and if it's a game, we'll jump into the gameplay. And lastly, does it still hold up? Or do we need to remove our nostalgia goggles? So, what game are we looking at today? That game would be Ratchet and Clank. When it comes to Ratchet and Clank, this game has a very soft spot in my heart. Now, for some context, one of the reasons I am so attached to this game is because it is the very first video game that I ever owned. Growing up, I didn't have access to a lot of media that the kids around me had at the time. Not necessarily because I was poor, but because I lived that boomer lifestyle with my parents, and they didn't want us to get into any video games. In fact, my uncle is actually the one that bought us this game, a PS2, and also Lord of the Rings Return of the King for me and my brother. I remember being in a Chuck E. Cheese in 2004 at my brother's birthday party when he got this for us, and I didn't even care at the time that the sequel games were already out. Quite frankly, I had no clue. So, after we had some zza, punched a robotic rat in the nutsack, and schooled some kids in skee-ball, my brother and I went home and set up the PS2 and started playing this gem of a game. Now, you may be thinking how you and your brother both play the game. It's only a single-player game. And if you thought that, you were very right. As the little brother, I was forced to sit and watch for hours on end. When it was my turn to play, I would start a new file and play through the same levels just to experience it myself. I was basically watching Let's Play IRL before they were even a thing, because if I tried to play, I would be beaten into submission by my older brother. However, that didn't stop me from falling in love with this game, and hopefully after this video, we will see if it holds up and if my childhood love of this classic is validated. So, what exactly is Ratchet and Clank for those who have never played it? Ratchet and Clank is a 3D platformer developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony Computer Entertainment for the PlayStation 2. It was released on November 4th of 2002. Insomniac Games was previously known for their work on the Spyro series and is known nowadays for both Ratchet and Clank as well as the new Spider-Man games. In terms of the reception for the game, it was well received, and by 2006 it had sold 1.1 million copies, and already had multiple sequels that had been released. Soon, Ratchet and Clank would become one of the mascots for PlayStation and stay that way even to this very day. It's obvious that the series started with a bang and was meant to stay, because it now has a total of 17 games released, with its most recent one in 2021, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which released on the PlayStation 5. So, does the game that started it all still hold up? Let's play the game and find out. When you first start the game, you are greeted by one of the best start menus in my opinion of any game. It is simple, serene, and it's just a view of Ratchet in his garage on the planet Velden where the game starts. I remember sitting as a kid for minutes on end watching this screen just so I could see all the animations that Ratchet did during it. Anyways, once we actually start playing the game, we are introduced to our main band of characters. We meet Ratchet the furry Lombax, who wants nothing better than to repair a ship and get off the desert planet he grew up on. Then we catch sight of the second part of our dynamic duo, Clank, who is currently booking it from the Popo for reasons we will soon find out. Clank, while escaping, crashes on Velden, and our job now is to go find out what the crash was and also coincidentally save our soon-to-be best buddy. Once we save Clank, he helps us get our ship up and running since he is equipped with the latest robotics ignition system, and that's where our adventure starts. From here on out, we explore multiple planets as Ratchet and Clank, with the objective of stopping the big bad of this game, Chairman Drek. Along the way, we are going to meet a multitude of fan-favorite characters as well that you will soon see. Now, I'm going to try covering the story the best I can, and let's see how this goes. After we save Clank, he shows us an infobot of Chairman Drek, who reveals his plan to destroy multiple planets so that he can build a single super planet for himself. Ratchet is like, "That's messed up, dude," and Clank is like, "I know, bro, we need to find Captain Quark so that he can save us." Ratchet agrees to bring him to find Quark in exchange for Clank getting him off Velden. We leave Velden and crash land on Novalis. After exploring Novalis, we run into 2 NPCs. We meet the fan favorite plumber, who gives us an infobot showing Skid McMarks crashing on another planet and him needing our help. We also meet the senator, and he tells us that the last time he saw Quark was in this infobot he shows us, where Quark is doing a commercial on planet Kerwin for Al's RoboShack. The senator then gives us a new ship to help him, and we are on our way. This is where the motives for our 2 main characters, Ratchet and Clank, start to split. Ratchet is still going to help find Quark for Clank, but he now wants to instead go see Skid McMarks on planet Iridia to get a sweet hoverboard from him. Now, depending on how you do the task, the order may vary, but I will go through the story with how I did it. We visit Kerwin to go see Al at his RoboShack, and he says that he has not seen Quark since his commercial. Also, here's Al. He's actually going to be one of the recurring characters in later games for Ratchet and Clank. He doesn't appear much in this game, but it's a good face to remember for the future. He gives Clank a sweet helipack upgrade to make him cool as fuck, boy. We leave his shop, and on our way back to the ship, we find an infobot for the planet of Eudora. This is a logging planet for Drek, where he is collecting lumber by destroying all of their forests. Before we make our way there, we have a few other things to do first. The first thing we do is encounter an obstacle course where Clank has to get catfished by Robot Quark. And then after completing it, we get fleeced by Helga, the fat robot, for a swing shot.
Ha! Real men can swing without silly toys like that! The 2 of you make me sick!
After getting fleeced, the duo wants nothing to do with Kerwin anymore and leaves. We get to Iridia, and all that basically happens here is we save Skid McMarks, we save his agent, and they gift us with a hoverboard. His agent, however, tells us to race for Skid if we can make it over to Blackwater City. Before we leave the planet, we also find a new gadget called the Trespasser. With our new gadget and our new board, we head on over to Eudora. In Eudora, we find another new gadget called the Suck Cannon. Wink wink. Also known as the Glizzy Gobbler. Well, actually, no one calls it that, but we can dream at least. Clank then intimidates one of Drek's generals and makes him give birth to a new infobot before leaving for some milk and never coming back to see his robot son. The new infobot reveals Drek's Blarg station. The crew then decides to visit the station since they still need to find some clues on where to find Quark. When we arrive at the station, we encounter some pretty wacky situations. We go on one route and save a scientist rat dude that ungraciously makes us pay for some new grind boots, even though we already had to save him and kill the mother of the xenomorph from Alien vs. Predator. Anyways, after getting the grind boots, we send Clank out into space where we walk about 2 miles per hour and he finds this new gadget called the Hydro Displacer. Before we leave though, we decide to go on a Blarg warship and have it self-destruct to cripple Drek. After running through an exploding ship like Indiana Jones escaping from a cave, we find a new infobot. This one shows us the new reporter from Blackwater City getting attacked by a slime thing.
In related news, this planet has recently been suffering from an infestation of strange amoeboid creatures.
Since Blackwater City is our next clue on where to go, we head that way and decide to find Quark and also compete in the hoverboard races while we are there. We arrive at Blackwater City and make our way down to the hoverboard races. We race in place for Skid McMarks and win first prize, which is a platinum Zoomerator. Along with that, we also get a shout out from Quark for winning and find out he is also in Blackwater City. Before we go to see him though, check this out. Apparently if you jump left and jump right in front of this lady, her boobs grow. Anyways, we go through the horrid water course that has haunted many 8-year-olds when the game was released, but now we beat it since we're adults with opposable thumbs. We get to Quark's trailer and we have to pay his bodyguard under the table to see Quark. We catch him doing some sus stuff and Clank tells him about the impending threat to the galaxy. Quark tells us that he will help us, but he wants to test us first, to see if we would be good heroes, and he gives us coordinates to his planet that he uses for training. At this point in the story, Ratchet has no more further motivation to go on. He already won the hoverboard race, they found Quark, so he sees no reason why they should be involved anymore. Clank tells him that they can be heroes too and convinces him to go to the Quark HQ on Umbris. We get there and have to avoid numerous death traps until we finally reach the end of the course where we are greeted by Quark. Well, and I will let you watch this next part.
Seem right. This is it. Quark is going to help us stop Chairman Drek.
Why, thank you, Clank. You've been most helpful.
Get off of me, you idiot!
I love it when a plan comes together.
Yep, that's right. Quark betrays us, and this is where we find out he is actually working for Drek. We fight the Blarg and Snagglebeast he unleashed to kill us and defeat it. This is where in the story there is a major rift between the two characters. Ratchet gets angry with Clank because he told him that Quark couldn't be trusted, and Clank was blinded by this false persona that Quark was putting on. From this point on, the two main protagonists are butting heads at every stop of the way, and most of it is Ratchet being a jerk to Clank, to be honest. Like, dude, give him some slack. He was literally born like a week ago and pushed off the assembly line. Do you think he knows what the concept of lying is? Do you think he understands that? Anyways, after defeating the Snagglebeast, they get the new infobot for the planet Battaglia, where there is a soldier that is getting bombed. Clank rushes for the two of them to save the soldier, and Ratchet reluctantly agrees. When I mentioned before that Ratchet had no motivation anymore since he won the hoverboard race and already escaped his planet, well, this is where he gets some motivation. He's now driven by the thought of revenge. While his companion Clank is driven out of the goodness of his heart to save the galaxy, Ratchet just wants to get revenge on Quark. These next few planets have a lot of hopping back and forth, so I'm going to go through the main plot points for each of them rapid fire. We visit Battaglia and grind on some rails, meet a soldier that wants to desert, he sells us an infobot for bus fare and then dives into the ocean. The infobot he gave us is for the planet Gaspar, where we will find the pilot's helmet. We then make our way through the rest of the current planet and meet with the lieutenant of the defending force of Battaglia. He gives us another infobot with the coordinates to planet Orxon. We will have to come back to Battaglia at a later point though once we receive the magnetic boots that will let us cross the platform to save Battaglia. We go to Gaspar, fight a bunch of people, reach the end of the planet, and get the pilot's helmet, which will be of use to us later. We leave Gaspar and go to planet Orxon. Orxon is so polluted that Ratchet can't leave the ship, so we have to go on a mission with only Clank. To be honest, I would rather give myself a million paper cuts, wash them all in lemon juice, then play Clank for another 2 minutes. We get through the planet with Clank and we find the magnetic boots we need for Battaglia. We also find an infobot for the planet of Pokitaru. This planet always gave me Surf's Up vibes when I read the name. Before we go there, however, we will first revisit Battaglia, use the magnetic boots to cross the cliff, and meet our friend the plumber again. We help him by shooting down a bunch of warships with the turret he's repairing, and he gives us a metal detector to find spare bolts. Since there's nothing left to do on this planet, we go to Pokitaru. This was always my favorite planet growing up. I think that was due to the vibes it gave me mostly. Anyways, we need to visit Pokitaru to get the O2 mask so that Ratchet can breathe on Orxon and leave the ship. The tour guide there tells us he can give us the mask, but we first have to get rid of all the Blarg and get him safely back on the other side of the resort. We fight a bunch of porcupine fish, megamine octopi, and get to the end of the resort. To get the mask, however, we need to shoot down all the Blarg ships with their jet fighter. To gain access to the jet though, we need to get an upgrade for Clank's helipack and turn it into a thruster back. We visit a nearby shop that is owned by Al's brother and he upgrades Clank. With the new upgrade, we now unlock the garage to the fighter jet. We then have to do our best Top Gun impression and save the planet. With the O2 helmet in our possession, we go back to Orxon and have to do the most annoying mission of them all throughout all the planets as Ratchet. After traversing the planet and dying like 30 times, we get to the end where we find another infobot that leads us to the planet Hoven, where Drek is making a bunch of bombs. Once more we make our way through the planet, and at the end we go to a turret and have to shoot down a nuclear missile that Drek was planning to use. We find another infobot after doing that, and it gives us coordinates to the Gemlik base. Before we go there, however, we first have to meet with another mechanic and get another upgrade. Clank does some flirting, however, and we get a slight discount, but as we know, nothing is free in the Ratchet and Clank universe. After that's done, we leave Hoven and go to the Gemlik base. Once we get here, we find out that Quark is also here, and Ratchet will finally get his chance at revenge. Just for a little recap, Ratchet between all these adventures has been a major jerk to Clank and has just been in a bad mood overall. So it's about time we get revenge and get to move on. We make our way through the base and everything culminates with a spaceship battle between us and Quark.
Mayday! Mayday! Well, Ratchet, I'd say you passed the test. Oh, boy.
After defeating Quark, Ratchet cools down a bit and decides to help Clank. They get the next infobot and are now on their way to the planet Altanis. On Altanis, there are raging lightning storms and now Ratchet has to travel alone without Clank or else Clank will get electrocuted. We go through the planet and eventually run into a scientist. We buy an infobot off of him and it has the coordinates to planet Quartu where Drek is creating giant mechs to fight for him. Before heading back to the ship, however, if we explore a different path, we actually run into Captain Quark. Steve.
Captain Quark!
Where?
Come on, Quark, I know it's you.
The name's Steve.
Who has a little stand where he sells us a portable Gadgetron vendor that we can use. After that weird encounter with Steve, we go back to the ship, inform Clank, and head over to planet Quartu. Here, our objective is to destroy the robot factory. We get to the end of the factory and run into the scientist who created the machine that turns the mechs giant. He's going to destroy the machine, but we offer to use it once to destroy the mechs before he destroys the device. Clank then does his best Gundam impression, and we have a giant mech battle. This almost makes up for the torturous Clank missions that they made us do earlier. After we destroy all the mechs, we shrink back down and receive another infobot, this time for the planet Kalibo 3. On this planet, we will get the Disguisatron that we can use to get back into the other robot factory and shut down production. We visit the planet, compete in another hoverboard race, become sponsors for Gadgetron, and then get the gadget we need to get back into the factory on Quartu. Oh yeah, and Clank also got a girlfriend on this planet as well. Anyways, back at Quartu, we use the Disguisatron and make it through the factory where we can shut off its production. At the end of the factory, we actually meet the computer that made Clank, also known as his mom. She gives us an infobot and we find out that Drek is going after Veldin, Ratchet's home planet. And now it gets personal for Ratchet. On our way out of the factory, we get a touching moment that brought tears to my eye between Clank and his mother.
I will try to make you proud, Mom.
Now we are off to Veldin to save Ratchet's planet and stop Drek. Before we can go on to the planet though, we have to first visit Drek's fleet that is orbiting the planet and destroy it. Eventually we do destroy the fleet and then we make our way back to the planet. Veldin has been overrun by Blarg and we have to go through and eliminate all the enemies now. We fight through an army worth of soldiers and finally make it to the end where we have to face Drek. We start the fight out as Giant Clank, but then Drek is getting his butt kicked so he shrinks us. We then have to traverse falling land masses while fighting Drek until we reach the final platform. Here Drek has set up a timer that will self-destruct if we don't defeat him in time. Eventually we do defeat him and we actually use his self-destruct button in reverse and we destroy the planet he was making for himself. The debris from the destroyed planet fall down and break the platform that we are on. Clank saves Ratchet, but his arm breaks in the process. Luckily, the universe is saved though, and we get this last touching moment from Ratchet and Clank.
That was close. Thanks.
My arm appears to be badly damaged.
Ah, you'll be all right. Hey, Tin Can! Where do you think you're going? We, still need to fix that arm.
And that's the story of Ratchet and Clank. So, does it hold up? Personally, I think it does. Some of the biggest gripes I hear from people is that they get mad when Ratchet turns into a jerk and starts to hate on Clank. Personally, I think that the conflict between the two main characters helps with the overall development of them. They have to overcome their differences, and by the end of the story, they become best friends. The story then comes full circle with us returning to Velden where it all started, as well as us getting development for both Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet gains some responsibility and learns that it's good to fight for a greater cause, instead of just doing whatever you want to do for yourself. And Clank as well learns not to be so trusting, but also learns that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Every time I play back through this story, it's always extremely enjoyable and the humor is still pretty funny as well. Well, we know the story holds up, so how's the gameplay? Ratchet and Clank is a 3D platformer and action shooter. Throughout the story, you collect gadgets and weapons that help you progress either in destruction aspect of things, platforming, or puzzle solving. This game series is well known for its wacky inventions, and it all started here. Let me go ahead and give you a quick rundown of them all. The first, and for me most handy of all weapons, is your Omni Wrench. As a kid, I would primarily use this only because the concept of switching weapons mid-combat was too intimidating. You start out with your handy-dandy bomb glove as well, that lets you toss grenades to and fro. Then you pick up the Pyrocitor, which is honestly one of the most useful weapons in the game, especially when it comes to crowd control. Next is the Blaster, which in concept is great, but in execution it could use a bit of work. We then get the Suck Cannon, which is actually underrated and comes in very handy against Drek. We also get the Glove of Doom, which is basically like Pokemon if when you threw the Pokeball, a swarm of exploding robots jumped out and tried to devour your enemy. After that, there's a few duds. We have the Taunter, which is useless. All it really does is call enemies towards you. We could also get the Mine Glove as well, which is useless. And I guess they were intended to be used together. You place the mines, then you taunt the enemies into them. But this isn't really a sneaky sneak type of game, it's a shooty shoot. And these two items just destroy the pacing if they are used. We also find out about the Rhino from this guy, but I have personally never gotten to use this weapon because it costs 150k bolts, which is more than you will get in your first playthrough unless you cheat. However, the Rhino is the strongest weapon in the game, and if you spend the time to get it, you will be well rewarded. The next weapon we gain access to is the Devastator, which is a must-have in this game for future levels. We also get the Walloper, which I use as a replacement for the wrench since it packs a real big punch. We then visit Poketaru and get the Decoy Glove, which is another useless weapon. Since it is meant to taunt your enemies like the Mine Glove or the Taunter, it just breaks the rhythm of the combat. After the Decoy Glove, you gain access to the Visibomb, which will be insanely useful on Velden. You get the Drone Device, and that basically is used as an extra shield for Ratchet, and lastly you get the Tesla Claw, which is the second best gun in the game, and is basically a cheat code for Drek. If you ever wanted to feel like a Sith Lord before, then this is the shiz you are looking for. And that rounds out all the weapons in the game, but there is one glaring issue when it comes to all of them. The original Ratchet and Clank game has no strafe, and it has a really bad lock-on system for the weapons. If you want to aim down sights on a weapon, you have to cease all movement and go into first person, aim, and then shoot. This leads to the combat just being easier with weapons that you don't have to aim. This is partly why as a kid I would always favor the wrench and the Pyrocitor because there's no skill needed to spin in a circle and hit everything. The good thing is that the game is based around the fact that you can't strafe, and there are only a few instances where it comes to bite you in the butt if you go in guns a-blazing. Those instances would be on planet Velden at the end and the Gadgetron planet as well. For these planets, you need to take a slower approach and use the Visibomb and Devastator, or else you will be having to rerun the level multiple times to beat it. Outside of these situations, however, the game runs very well and is balanced to whichever playstyle fits you best. Outside of the combat, the game is also a platformer. So, how does Ratchet get around? The majority of the game you are aided by Clank, and once you get the Helipack upgrade, you can now jump big gaps, hover, and glide. The level design plays well around this, but to be honest, platforming is not the primary aspect of the levels. The majority of the platforming is based around specific gimmicks and gadgets. Whether that's you sliding around on ice and dealing with how unstable it is, or using the slingshot to swing like Tarzan to and fro, there is usually some aspect thrown in that makes it interesting. The only aspect of the platforming that is a real annoyance is the magnetic boot sections. Once more, like Clank levels, the main issue here is the whole pace of everything gets slowed down. You can't sprint or jump or use any weapons when you're using the boots, and they are some of the worst moments to play as Ratchet. One of the most fun platforming aspects to play with Ratchet is the grind boots, however. I always loved these as a kid because it made me feel like I was Sonic whenever I would grind on rails. Which leads me into the next aspect of the level design, which are the miscellaneous activities and puzzles that are needed to be done to progress through the game. When it comes to the activities, the most common one you'll find are the hoverboard races. These are fun for what they are, but I have never really wanted to go back in and explore them further. Once you get done with them, you just kind of move on. And when it comes to the other activities, they are in the form of puzzles. There are two main types of puzzles you do in Ratchet and Clank. One is the encryptor, where you move beams of lights to unlock a door. These aren't too difficult, but they may take a few minutes to figure out some of the tougher ones. The other form of puzzles are the most boring, and you have to do them in the game: water puzzles. The notorious one is the one in Blackwater City, where you have to use the hydro device to drain rooms and fill them back up with water. These are just long-winded and no one actually likes them. Especially in Blackwater City, where they mix it in with an obstacle course where if you're not quick enough going through it, you will drown. Ooh, the rage that this level built up for me as a kid. Anyways, though all of these obstacles and puzzles and platforming blend into each other, and they shine when it comes through with the level design, each planet will have multiple branching paths that you can choose to take at any time. Some will be more combat focused while others will be more platform focused. Some of these paths will lead you to the story items needed to progress, and others will just lead you to collectibles like the golden bolts or skill points. These collectibles come into play for New Game Plus, where you can upgrade your weapons further with a collection of these bolts and skill points. All of these collectibles in New Game Plus gives this game a lot of replayability. However, as a kid I was so dumb that New Game Plus did not exist as a concept to me. Once I beat the game, instead of starting a New Game Plus, I would just delete my file and start over. So to this day, I have not played New Game Plus, and I probably still won't. And I'll just leave it that way because personally, I've always been the type to play it through once and just enjoy the game for what it is on the first playthrough. And for the most part, that's how the gameplay goes when it comes to Ratchet and Clank. So, does Ratchet and Clank hold up? Or, when we look back at it, are we blinded by nostalgia? And personally, I would say it passes the nostalgia check. Even though there are a few issues with the game, like the non-strafing or the puzzles, to be honest, the overall story really outshines all of that. The growth between Ratchet and Clank, the overall humor, and the touching moments all culminate to make a game that I would recommend that everyone truly experiences. And if you've already played the game, then I would recommend that you play it again like I do almost every year. Thank you all for joining me today though, on this first episode of Nostalgia Check. I hope you liked the video. If you can subscribe and leave a like, that would be greatly appreciated. These videos do take a while to make, so I wouldn't expect them to come out anytime soon. The next game I'm probably going to review though will be Resident Evil 4, one of my favorite games. We'll see if it stands up to the test of time. I think you probably already know the answer. Anyways though, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. My name is Marsh, and this has been Nostalgia Check. Bye bye everyone.